on a talk I gave a little while ago, but I figured like no one wants to. I presume no one wants to watch me like just do math all the time. So I stripped out some of the math. So anyway, I just want to do like sort of like, who here actually thinks of themselves as a scientist? Like trick question. Like, who here trusts science? Okay. So my explicit goal of this talk is to get you to trust science less. The numbers are made up to make a point. Although I'll point to the top that I kind of got the idea from. So like, suppose that we get the following numbers on graduate school admissions. So we have like, accepted and rejected is a percentage. So like, this looks like a pretty clear-cut case of like, okay, maybe by chance, like there's a case here that there's discrimination. Like there's discrimination of men versus women on the acceptance rates. So after this happens, you're like, oh, I see this data. It's like, let's go look at every department. And then you see, and like, if you check these numbers, the numbers add up, right? It's like, okay, so let's look at all the humanities. Men, 20% acceptance rate. Women, 30% acceptance rate. Okay, let's look at all the science departments. Men, 60% acceptance rate. Women, 70% acceptance rate. So, per department, it looks like there's a small, significant bias in favor of women. In aggregate, it looks like there's a bias in favor of men. This is the same data set. This is kind of counterintuitive. But like, if you check these numbers add up correctly. So these numbers are very round. That's how you never fake. Real numbers are never actually round off to like, real numbers are never visible. But if you check out this paper, this was sex bias and graduate admissions data from Berkeley, Nickel et al. But if you look at all these numbers, like they pull the actual numbers out and they look like, okay, overall, men are getting accepted to graduate school at a higher rate than women, but per department, women are getting accepted at a higher rate than men, which makes for a kind of weird, like, statistical artifact. Here's a medical example. Maybe I can fit all the data on one slide here. So we can say, like, let's suppose there's like 2 treatments. So like we have like, we give people a drug, or we don't give them a drug. And then we have these subgroups. So like maybe the original data was like different kinds of treatment for kidney stones, and the subgroups were like large kidney stones or small kidney stones. I see one person nodding, like you might have seen this study. But like, okay, in the first subgroup, if we give the treatment, it's a 93% success rate. If we don't give it, it's an 87% success rate. In the second subgroup, if we give them the treatment, it's a 73% success rate. If we don't, it's 69% success rate. If we look at the aggregate data, if we give them a treatment, it's a 78% success rate. If we don't, it's an 83% success rate. There's a reversal. If you add up these numbers, like these numbers add up correctly. I don't know if like I don't really know if people like want to like try to add them up themselves and get the word for it. So this is called like this is well known in the statistics literature as Simpson's paradox. I don't know like if anyone's heard of that before. Okay. So it's just one of those weird things where it's like no, like what you're looking at is like you may notice the subgroups are very different in size, which kind of gives you a little insight into how this might happen. So like like in this subgroup, like there's a lot more people in the non-treatment group, and here there's a lot more people in the treatment group. So you can kind of see like we're looking at when you add up the numbers, you get this reversal on the percentages, but like the numbers do work out.
It's not just a poorly set up experiment.
Oh no, right. So this is not even an experiment. This is not a randomized controlled experiment. This is observational data.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, same thing for like this, admissions test. Like we're not randomly assigning people to say you apply to this graduate school, you by coin flip apply to this graduate school. This is like a passive observation data, and like there's good reason randomized controlled experiments are considered the gold standard of scientific research because for the most part they eliminate problems like this. But a lot of times you still need to figure out is this thing happening or not, and you can't ethically run an experiment. Like it's just not ethical to well, first of all, it's not ethical to say like you coin flip, you have to apply to this graduate school. Coin flip, you have to apply to this graduate school. It's even less ethical in some of these medical cases where it's like you really want to figure out what actually works. And if you don't have to, you really don't want to subject people to a randomized controlled trial. There's been several cases, like this is something that happens in the FDA all the time. Like you'll design an experiment, and halfway through the experiment, it becomes really obvious that this drug's healthy, to the point where it's like it's no longer ethical to continue the experiment. Before it was, but now it's so obvious we gotta stop. So I guess like the point is like yes, do randomized controlled trials when you can, but you still need a way to figure out, like, you know, if I have this data, you know, it's like if I look at this overall, it looks like I don't want to use the drug. If I look at each subgroup, it looks like I want to use the drug. And I really want to know which one of these do I believe. Because it's not one subgroup, it's both subgroups. So there's been like several complaints, like you can read about Simpson's paradox, and for decades, this is like, oh yeah, you have to really watch out for this reversal, and then no one solved the problem. So like, it's actually something that drives me nuts. You can take statistics classes, and they'll totally tell you about this. And most statistics classes, especially like, you know, like a senior level, like first course of statistics, will tell you about this problem, and they will not tell you the solution. It drives me insane. So the intuition here is it depends what the mechanisms are. So like, if the subgroup was blood pressure, and the treatment affects blood pressure, and the treatment also affects where we're not going to recover. The idea of looking at the subgroups is like, oh, we're looking at the subgroups, but the treatment causally affects what the subgroup will be. So you do not want to look at the subgroups, you want to look at the overall result. Like the idea is like if you look at the subgroups, you're blocking out information you shouldn't be. And then like, the other case is like, oh, the subgroups are some independent factor that causes both the treatment and the result. So this is like the solution to the original scenario. Oh, the story is like, yeah, if we look at these, you know, if we look at the men versus women subgroups here, what was going on is like, yes, it turns out women had I exaggerated the bias. The bias was much smaller than this in real life. But yes, there is a small but significant bias in favor of women here. But what happened is for some external reason, like we can debate over what it is, I don't feel like it's politically charged. But like for some reason, women were more likely to apply to departments that were hard to get in. And men were more likely to apply to departments that were easier to get in compared to like what happens. So you can kind of like imagine it's like, oh, like well, more women are applying to this department that just is harder, that screens out people more harshly. So when you aggregate the data, oh, it looks like women get in at a lower rate. So if like this is the scenario, and you're trying to figure out, is there a departmental bias? The answer is like, okay, you do want to look at the subgroups. If this is the scenario, you don't want to look at the subgroups because you're throwing out information that's useful. Statisticians don't like using directed acyclic graphs. Like a couple of the really enlightened ones do, and then most of the rest of the statisticians are like, oh, dag, go away, go. And then like, this is what's actually happening in the medical example. Like, these subgroups were kidney stone size, small and large. And what was happening is due to a wrong standard practice, we're like, oh, if you have small kidney stones, we'll send you to this other treatment, which we think is better on small kidney stones. But like, you know, which subgroup you were in affected which treatment the doctor was likely to give you. But it also affected the results. So what was happening is like a whole bunch of people who were more likely to recover anyway were being sent to the worst treatment, which was enough to swamp out the effects, making it look like the worst treatment was actually better. Because so many people who were like, the idea was like, you think this in terms of like, these people were more likely to recover to begin with, were sent to the worst treatment, and because there are so many of them, it was enough to like skew it and make it look like the worst treatment was actually better.
Well, that's what she said. It's a poorly designed experiment.
Oh, yeah, it's very poorly
Or
designed.
poorly designed observation. You weren't comparing like with like.
Right, you weren't.
And in both cases, that's.
But like sometimes, no, and like if you design the experiment correctly, this wouldn't happen. But sometimes this is the only data you have. So like the question, so like, you know, like the answer is like, you know, I'll talk about it a little later. There are rules, like if you are confident enough in what's happening, you can draw these diagrams, and then like the diagrams will tell you, should I look at the subgroups or should I look at the overall? No, you're absolutely right. Like if we had a good designed experiment, we should just use that data. And then, but like think about how many times when like it's just there's a lot of times when, like, either for expense or for ethical reasons or something, you can't look at the properly designed experimental data. It's like, what you see is what you get. Go do some analysis. All right, yeah, this is called the reversible paradox or validation paradox. So like,